Drew Mayer. This is Drew Mayer. He's going to talk to us a little bit about thought control. So that's what Drew's going to tell us about. So let's give it up for Drew Mayer. So good?
Hello? Yeah, no, I'm kind of busy right now. Got my notes here. Let me see if I can do that. Okay, got my notes. All right, so, well, I want to thank Casey for putting this on. This is great, and so glad he invited me. Let's see, about thought control. A little bit about my background is that I was in a cult for a number of years, and I was a convert. I wasn't raised, and so I had a lot of adversity when I was young. And what that did was cause me to rebel and join a cult as a young kid. One of the things that a lot of people don't really understand about thought control is it's come out lately that it's the idea of thinking of it as more of a spectrum. So the spectrum, when we think of thought control, it's more undue influence is what it's now being called. And so what we think of as thought control is on the high end with undue influence. And then after that we have politics, religion, and then we have culture on the low end. So it's more of a spectrum like that. How many here are Christian? Quite a few. All right. Yeah, Christians are brave, and it's nice that they're here to listen to an atheist talk about thought control. One of the important things about thought control is everyone's heard of cognitive dissonance theory. I'll explain how that goes. And what I've done before when I've given this talk is I've played a little video, and the video uses some visuals, so it's good to I'll have to substitute that with some hand gestures. It's good to think about it, or it's good to see the visuals with it. And one of the leading experts on thought control, he came out with what's called the BITE model, and it's the acronym. It stands for behavior, information, thought, and emotion. And and so how that goes into cognitive dissonance, it's an easy way to remember it. How we think of it is we take thought, behavior, and emotion. We take those three, kind of make a little visual triangle with that. And what that does is that's our mental paradigm. And think of that as kind of our map of how we determine reality. One thing I will say about the high end of thought control, the undue influence, one of the misconceptions about that is that it's all religious. It's not. What we have up there is we have isolation and we have polarization. And I think we kind of know how isolation works. It doesn't mean you're sitting alone. You still have friends, but you only kind of associate with kind of people who think the same way. And with polarization, the difference there is they tend to vilify more. You end up just around the same people, but you're not isolated, but you tend to kind of just vilify people, and whereas the isolation end, they tend to have more of a claims of special knowledge. That's the term that's used a lot, is claim of special knowledge, so they think they're enlightened. So I'll get into it more on the thought, behavior, and emotion. And the video I play, it's of a little kid named Caleb, a little boy named Caleb. He's all excited. He's just got a friend gave him this cool toy, Sparlock the Warrior Wizard, and he comes home. He's playing it with it, and his mommy sees him, and his mommy has issues with that. And so she takes him aside and makes him a snack and says, well, how does God feel about magic? And, well, Caleb answers, God hates it. And you can see the cognitive dissonance going. The emotions are being pulled there. And what happens with cognitive dissonance, that triangle, it breaks. It'll break. The emotions and behavior, his playing with the toy, gets separated, and he's kind of not worried about that. And then what his mom does is his mom takes him out to the front or out to the sidewalk where the trash can is, and it shows him throwing it away. She talks him into throwing it away, and that's a behavior. And so the cognitive dissonance that was separated comes back together because he behaved. Behavior is kind of a linchpin to do this. And with behavior, we tend to go by default. We have a halo over our heads. So any way we behave, our default is to believe that's good. And so Caleb, he ends up believing in a God that hates wizards, Sparlock. And that's just one thought that goes to his behavior, goes to belief. So that's just one of his thoughts. And we all have all kinds of thoughts, multiple thoughts in our heads. And our mind is always fighting to keep thoughts, behavior, and emotions congruent. It does that. Our mind fights to do that. And we have so many thoughts that we're all keeping together. That's why we're often really confused people. And that's also why when you try to convince someone of one specific fact, and the information, they'll automatically reject it. And what we don't realize is that we're not just convincing of one little thing, we're pulling a thread that kind of might undo a whole lot more than just the one thing that we think we're talking to them about. Okay. And so our minds are all set in a certain mental paradigm sort of way, all kinds of thoughts. So what I'm going to get into with Christianity is just a little briefly of its history, written down 2,000 years ago. And then Constantine kind of compiled what we have as what we know as the Bible. But it was in Latin, and there were very few people who were literate for 1,000 years or so, and until Luther came along and the Gutenberg press, and the rates of literacy increased, and so that created a mental paradigm of people who believed that Jesus was the prime example in their life. And with that mental paradigm, that strong like that, that's going to create a whole lot of change in the culture. If you can see the differences in culture where they believe something else other than Jesus, you can see the difference that religion, the effect religion has on each and every culture. They're all very different. And from my view, I think culturally we're all pretty much Christians here today. Even though I say I'm an atheist, I think culturally, pretty much anyone here is culturally a Christian. It's just had that much influence on our culture. So I'll give you a quick example of high control, undue influence on steroids. When I was in a cult, one of the things that was emphasized was do not be stumbling your brother. And in a parallel world, we also have, I think everyone's probably heard of microaggressions. I think most people have heard of that. And so they're pretty much the same thing. The goal is to not offend the one who's going to be most easily offended. The goal is to not offend them. And what that does is it restricts our speech. And when we restrict our speech, we restrict our thought. And so that's a bit of thought control on steroids. And for an ex-cult member with free speech under attack, That's so much information control that it's really scary, and it's good to know, or it's good to keep in mind that it's not only under attack legally, but we can see it under attack culturally too. And it looks like Casey's getting nervous, so I should get off the stage.